Hi everyone, welcome to today's lesson 4, the supply curve. So for today, we'll be looking at how producers make their decisions, and we'll represent this with a simple diagram which is called the supply curve. This curve, as you can see, looks very similar to the demand curve, except that it is upward sloping instead of downward sloping. So on the y-axis, we have, as usual, the price of the good. On the x-axis, we have the quantity of the good. And I've labeled a point A which shows that at the price, which is $5, the producers are willing to produce 100 units of corn. Okay, so when we look at supply curves, we can be looking at a supply curve of a particular firm, or we can also be looking at a supply curve of a particular industry or the market as a whole. So right now here, I'm going to assume that we are looking at the industry, meaning the corn market, or the corn producers, the total quantities that they are willing and able to supply. Okay, so now we move on to the definition of supply. As you can see, it's quite sy- symmetric to that of the definition for demand, which is which actually is supply is refers to how much quantity of a good or service that the producer is willing and able to sell at a given price level over a period of time, ceteris paribus. So like demand, it is a flow concept, and it also assumes that all other factors are constant. So the only thing that varies here are these two variables, which are price level, which is we look at how when price level changes, how that will affect the quantity that is being supplied by the producer. So again, it is willing and able to, because willing means that the producer wants to supply that amount of good or service, and able to means that it has the resources and the capabilities and the technology to actually produce that um, additional additional amount, or perhaps reduce that amount. Okay, so the next thing is, again, we look at the model, which is like the demand function, except that now we have a upward sloping curve. So instead of minus we have plus. So the assumption of the model is that as the price increases, the quantity supply of a good will increase. So why is this the case? Okay, logically it makes a lot of sense, because as the price of a good increases, the supplier will want to increase their profits by supplying more of the good. Okay, but we'll come back. We look at this in more detail in the future, when we look at producer theory. But the basic understanding here should be that after you have went through all this talk about the PPC, and how there are opportunity costs involved in our production and goods and services and so on, it should be quite natural to you at this point to think about how um, when producers make decisions, they have to look at, um, for example, the given resources that they have, what are the different combinations of goods and services they can produce. So uh, when the price of their product increases, so now we are assuming that, so now you can see some of the assumptions come into play, because now we are assuming that the price is dictated by a market, and the producers themselves have no control over the price. So when the price of something increases, okay, the producers, which are looking at the price to decide how much they should produce, will compare the price against their opportunity cost or their marginal cost of production. So basically, when they make this comparison, they can then decide, as a rational producer, recall the concept of rationality, they can then decide whether to produce more or to produce less of the good or service based on the existing price compared to the opportunity cost or the marginal cost. Okay, so at this point, I want to clarify that when I use the terms interchangeably, opportunity cost and marginal cost, is because that in this case, um, I'm referring specifically to the opportunity cost of reducing that one unit of production, or increasing that one unit of production. So basically, in this case, the marginal cost is equals to the opportunity cost, because I am making them equal in this case. So be careful about how you use these two terms. Just understand their definitions very well so that you don't misuse them. Okay, so now we look at a diagram. Again, a supply curve. So as the price increases from $5 to $6 for a corn, we expect that producers will increase their quantity produced from 100 to 150. Okay, so previously, the total revenue earned by producers will be 5 times 100, which is price times quantity, which is $500. Now, after the price increase, the total revenue earned will be 6 times 150, assuming that all this quantity is being sold. Okay, so we have not looked at how the supply and demand will come together to actually determine how much is being sold in the marketplace. So right now we are only looking at things from the supply side, which is when price increases, how much are producers willing and able to produce. But it does not mean that they will actually produce this amount, because it actually depends on whether consumers will demand this amount at $6. So again, that is when we look at both of the curves together, and that will be in the next lesson. So again, now we look at what affects A. So this is very similar to the demand, and I'm going to help you with a simple acronym, which is PEPPER. Okay, so for PEPPER, what does it mean? Okay, you see some of these things here are actually similar to the demand factors that affect demand, but they are actually very different. So firstly, when we say price of related goods, what do I actually mean? For when we look at demand, we are talking about the price of substitutes and the price of complements. But here for supply, it is a bit different. When we say price of related goods, we are looking at stuff like we are looking at things like, for example, let's say you produce leather. So leather comes from cows. So cows will produce both milk and leather, right? So if let's say the price of milk goes up, okay, if the price of milk goes up, then there will be more production for there will be more milk being quantity produced for milk will be higher, so the quantity supplied of milk will be higher, and as a result, you expect that the quantity supplied for leather at each price level will be higher as well, because as you kill more cows to get milk, you will also generate more leather. Okay, so that will cause an increase in the supply of leather in general. Okay, so you can see that these two goods are in joint supply. So the term here is joint supply. Okay, then there's another case which is competitive supply. So when two goods are in competitive supply, for example, let's say when you have to produce biofuel, okay, you make use of corn, for example. Then as a result, when you use corn to produce biofuel, you cannot use the same corn to um, produce the food where people can consume. So as a result, when the price of biofuel increases, okay, and producers will want to produce more corn. Will want to produce more biofuel, and as a result, they will divert their resources to the product. They will divert corn to the production of biofuel, and hence the price of corn. The price of corn will actually the supply of corn to be used for food will actually drop. Will actually be lower now, because now these two are in competitive supply. Okay, so I should write it here. Joint versus competitive. Okay, as you can see that deleted one of my lines, so let's just put a short form. Alright, the next thing is expectations. So what is it about expectations? Again, is about expectations of future prices, as well as future future prices in the marketplace. Okay, so if producers expect that prices are going to rise, they want to produce more in the present. Okay, so I'm sorry, if producers expect that prices are going to rise, okay, they will want to produce less now, because they want to wait for the price to actually increase in the future, and then they will step up their production. Okay, so as a result, you can see that this might actually be a self-fulfilling prophecy, because as you expect prices are going to rise, okay, on the consumer side, consumers will consume more now, so the demand will increase, and on the producer side, you will have producers producing less now, so there will be an increase in demand and a fall in supply. Okay, and we'll look at it in the next lesson, but as a result of both of these effects, you can expect that the price of something will actually rise, and that will actually fulfill that expectation. Okay, so it's actually a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, and the next thing is the price of input. So this basically refers to the cost of production. Okay, So when your cost of production rises, for example, if you require oil for production, many of our basic goods and services require oil. So when the price of oil goes up, when the price of petroleum goes up, okay, the cost of production for this production for these firms, for these suppliers will go up. So when the cost of production goes up, okay, you will expect that the supply will fall for a good. Because for each price level now, that is for each price level that the producer is um, facing for the good, they will be willing to produce less of their good because of a higher cost of production. Or in other words, they will require a higher compensation, a higher price to compensate for the same level of production because of the higher costs. The next thing is production condition. So this the most common item here is actually the state of technology. Because if let's say the state of technology improves, when the state of technology improves, with the same amount of resources, you can produce more goods and services. So as a result, is as if the cost of production has fallen. So this improve in technological processes will actually shift the supply curve to the right. So it means that for every price level, there will be more goods being produced. And you can also look at this in terms of the PPC curve, because when there's a change in technology, when there's improvement in technology, you can expect that the PPC will shift outwards. Okay, so at the previous point in the old PPC, the opportunity cost of producing actually falls. So in the same way, this represents a fall in the marginal cost. And this fall in the marginal cost will actually will this fall in the marginal cost at every single price level will translate into a lower cost of production. So that means the supply curve will actually shift up. Okay, so the supply curve will shift out, shift to the right. Okay, the next thing is about the entry and exit of suppliers. So for example, when new firms enter and exit the market, that will actually affect the supply of the good in the market. So previously I was talking about the corn industry, the corn market. So imagine now if next year there are more suppliers entering the market for any particular reason, and that would actually cause the supply curve to shift to the right, because then the this these firms this there'll be more firms, and with the same technologies, with the same, and assuming they have like the same technology and the same resources available as the other firms, they will together be able to produce more goods and services, and hence that will actually shift the supply curve out to the right, because at each price level, the amount that all the firms can produce have actually increased. Okay. The last thing is about regulation by the government. So what kind of policies do the government have in place? Do these policies stimulate producers to produce more? Like for example, do they have subsidies available? Like implementation of a subsidy can cause the supply curve to increase, cause the supply to increase. For example, in Europe, they subsidize the use of, let's say, biomass, which is basically, let's say, they can burn, let's say, wood or biofuel, and if they use those things in their production processes, then they will receive subsidies because they want to meet a certain um, emission target. So that is actually one thing that can affect the supply of goods and services. So the regulation of by the government. So as you can see here, as I've mentioned previously, all these things in the previous slide, we're talking about shift in the supply curve. So that's opposed to movement along the supply curve, as we have seen on the previous slide. Okay, so that's all. So in summary, supply refers to the quantity of good or service that a producer is willing and able to sell at a given price level over a period of time, such as variables. Okay, and as the price of a good increases, quantity of supply of a good will increase. Next is that the changes in price will result in movements along the supply curve, and the changes in other factors, pepper, okay, try and recall what they are, affecting A, the this component of the model that we're looking at, will actually lead to a shift of the supply curve. So finally, we come to the end, and I hope that you'll join me in the next lesson, because now we've looked at both the supply and the demand curve, and it's exciting, and you can see that how, perhaps now it's time to look at how they can gel together to form a more consistent model for the that we'll basically be using. This is going to be the basis of a lot of our economic analysis from now on, and it's going to be very important. and we'll also be looking at things like consumer surplus, producer surplus. So we're doing a bit of welfare analysis in the next lesson, and also about equilibrium price and quantity. So what happens when, let's say, supply increases and demand increases, or when both of these shifts happen simultaneously? What would then affect? What would then change? How would that affect the equilibrium price and quantity in the marketplace? So that's all, and I hope you have enjoyed today's lesson. And till next time, dream economics.